Thank you. All right, so now we'll dive in. So just really briefly, we have a nice representative range of companies up here, and the goal of this panel is just to get their perspective on some of the questions that students have as they are entering or re-entering the job market and thinking about resumes and portfolios and how to talk about their knowledge and skills, and just from your perspective. So just briefly, I'd like to introduce Jennifer Hopper from Filter Digital. Aaron Braco, also an MHCID alum, from Google. Johnny, and I'm gonna Schrepfer, yeah, got it, yay, first try, from IA Collaborative, all the way here from Chicago. And Dave Miller from Artifact here locally. And I'm actually gonna ask each of you just to give a little bit about your company, your role, and in particular, what your involvement is with hiring.
Hi, everyone. Linda, thank you for inviting me. I'm with Artifact. I'm Dave Miller. And for those of you that don't know, we're an innovation firm. And we specialize in version 1, next generation product design and development. I lead recruiting there and community outreach. And so if you want to get a job at Artifact, it ends up going through me, basically. So I'm the gatekeeper of sorts and connector of things.
Hi, my name is Johnny Schrepfer. I'm a senior interaction designer at a design and innovation studio called IA Collaborative in Chicago, Illinois. And what we do is we position ourselves as kind of the forefront of design thinking by combining user-centered design, strategy development, and business consulting. So we do a wide range of strategy and innovation products, digital product design, and service design initiatives in Chicago, Illinois.
Hey, my name is Aaron Braco, and I'm an interaction designer at Google. Google does a ton of things, but the team I'm on is the search team within Google. And specifically, I work on contextual assistive experiences for Google Now. So you can think of these as sort of like experiences that are pushed to you proactively. And then I also do work on content, search results, and search content. And you can think of these as content that you get, that you pull specifically. So you type in a query and it's pushed to you. So that, so basically this mix of push and pull experiences is something I work on at Google. I don't have any official authority to recruit, but I'm here to have conversations. I'm here to make connections if I hear openings at Google. And just having joined Google like 6 months ago, I don't have as much experience as the rest of these folks, but I probably have more relevant experience closer to the job hunting flurry that you guys will go through soon, because I did that 7-8 months ago.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Hopper, and I'm with Filter. And we're a digital creative talent company. And effectively what that means is that we help top brands execute on their digital creative. And of course that means experience and product design as well. And we do that by connecting them to our network of top talent around the country. And we work with companies around the country as well. And my role is I'm lead talent manager. Our headquarters are here in Seattle, and we're here in Seattle. And we support companies across the West Coast and into Texas and New York. However, we really try to support a company wherever they are in the country. And I'm definitely excited to be here to learn more about the program and more about you and more about the companies that are here today and provide any support that we can. I guess I'll wait.
Hold on to it. We'll pass it as we go. So I'm going to ask just a couple of questions first, and it's up to you if you want to answer or pass or whatever. And I'll kick things off, and then we'll open up the floor to folks in the audience to ask questions. So first, this is one that I know students are always curious about. And I wonder if you could speak to the role of an online portfolio in your recruiting and hiring process. Are there specific things you're looking for? How are you using that? What do you want to see in that? And how is that shared in your hiring process?
I can give a more general approach, and then I'd love to hear, what these gentlemen have to say. But online portfolio for us is everything. I find that in UX and visual design that an online portfolio is almost superseding the resume in the way that talent is vetted and looked at initially. And the things that I'm finding I'm being asked for more and more is a clear vision of how you think and your process. So not just a final output of what you've created for your client, but what was the problem you were given? What actions did you take? What solutions did you come up with? What was your particular role? And then what results did you produce? And even a step further, what we're finding is some of our clients really enjoy seeing if there's a key learning. Was the product successful, or was what you created successful? And if it wasn't, why, and what would you do differently? So that really gives a full scope approach to who you are as a UX designer without having to be there in person.
I'm going to have to second most of your thoughts on the key pieces of a portfolio, and that it's definitely way more important than a resume. At Google, I don't think it's everything. I think the on-site interview is like the make or break, because that's where we can assess more of the soft skills and how you are as a human being. And a portfolio is a way to get your foot in the door. And it's also a great way for us to learn how you think, what you've learned, tools you've used, the people you've worked with. But we can't really judge how you collaborate and things like that, which is stuff we leave for the on-site interview. And another thing I want to call out about the portfolio is we use it to just judge the kinds of work you do. If we're hiring an interaction designer at Google, we typically look for generalists, and these are people who have at least some experience with or can converse with developers and researchers and copywriters and motion designers and prototypers and that kind of thing. And so interaction designers really need to have a breadth of these skills, not necessarily hard skills in these areas, but at least knowledge of what goes into all of this. And that is what we look for in your portfolio. Have you worked on a website? Have you worked on a mobile app? Within that, have you done visual design? Have you done prototyping? Have you built stuff? And we're just trying to see how many boxes you check off, because we're really looking for generalists who can fit in a whole number of product areas.
Yeah, so I think building on what we've just heard, I look personally at the portfolio. It's kind of three key steps. First is kind of that baseline approach, right? So talking about how this either supplements or even replaces the resume in some instances. There are certain companies, whether it be innovation or design studios, that place a greater emphasis on your portfolio and your work. But to me, that's kind of just the baseline piece of starting the conversation. I think kind of two other key things as designers, and specifically as an interaction designer, that I view portfolios as is really this deep dive around each product. So exactly what you're saying of what's the story end to end. It's not necessarily what the final visual is and how beautiful the design is, but it's also where did you start? Who did you speak to? What did you learn? What was your initial hypothesis going in? How did that change? And kind of continuing that conversation. So not only demonstrating your thought process, but demonstrating how you can take principles from research or from collaborating with others and how you apply that strategically to your designs, I think is equally as important. Definitely there are on-site interview opportunities where you can start to show some of your more soft skills, but having a portfolio that speaks to the story behind your work as well as the actual end result, I think is critically important. I think the last piece that I wanted to call out or kind of build on is this idea as designers is really turning that question around and having a point of view. So as a designer, what inspires you? What are you passionate about? What excites you most about the field? And then how does that translate or show up in your work? So for example, if you're an interaction designer and you're focused on digital product design and you're an advocate for the user, which all of you should be, and accessibility is a really big thing. Show how your final project reflects accessibility standards. Or if you're really into service design and changing customer experience, how does the project or portfolio piece that you're highlighting reflect your values or reflect your beliefs? So I think there's a huge opportunity, and quite frankly, in looking at lots of portfolios, week in and week out, a huge opportunity to differentiate yourself by having a stance and a point of view on who you are as a designer and what values you have as a designer as well.
All great feedback, all of which I agree with. If I could add anything to what they built on, outside of deep and thorough case studies that show your unique point of view and your process and how you solved some of the problems and came to the solutions. There is definitely an emphasis at Artifact on the actual visual presentation of the portfolio, down to typography, color, space, each in a thorough case study where you're talking about process and you're talking about the problem and you're showing the final deliverable. Each one of those brackets is a tiny portfolio piece within the portfolio piece. So for us, where we have, we're a 60-person company and we're not hiring thousands of people, we get very granular into the actual appearance of it all, even if you're not forte likewise visual design. So.
Okay, that was awesome. So another question is, aside from specific software tools or methods, what are other more general skills or experiences that you're typically looking for when hiring someone in a role in your company? Either UI, UX, design, research, strategy, soft skills, or other experiences or capabilities that don't maybe fit into the formal job description?
Well, I mean, a good culture fit is huge for us. There's several ways that we go about exploring that, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit more later. I think that, for us, it's, I don't know, I think I could.
Do you want to just combine that?
Yeah.
So the other question is, how do you assess whether a candidate is a cultural fit for your specific company and team culture? So maybe just you can combine those.
No, that's great. I mean, so for us, when you full loop at Artifact, you do a 30 to 45 minute presentation on your background. We want to know where you're from, how you fit into a creative process, how you create impact. We want to see how you communicate. There's design exercises throughout the interview process where you're paired with other peer level designers to work through problems and solutions. There's no end game to that, so you're not solving the problem. It's just how do we communicate? How do you take lead on a tough, wide open challenge and approach it? So those are some of the ways that we kind of get to the heart of how you communicate and how you collaborate.
So I think outside of the tools and kind of more hard skill sets, one thing from an interaction design standpoint that we look for is the ability to balance kind of two key modes as a designer. And that first mode really being seeing the vision or the strategic, like the higher strategic vision of what this product is or what this service is. And then that second mode being kind of the more detailed executional aspects of design. So being able to have an individual that can step into a situation and can speak to kind of the higher level vision and strategic point of view. So we want this experience to achieve these following things, but then also understand kind of the details that are required to execute that vision. So we all, as interaction designers or HCI or UX professionals, are very familiar with different diagramming softwares and prototyping, and all of that is great. But I would encourage each of you to also think higher level in terms of the bigger picture and the vision and the strategic kind of point of view. So when we're assessing candidates specific to interaction design, it's those individuals that are able to kind of speak to that vision and strategy, but also talk about kind of color and interaction choice and layout as well. And those are the candidates that I think do incredibly well in an environment like IA Collaborative. As far as the culture fit, just for some context, similar to Artifact, IA Collaborative is a 65, 70 person company, multifaceted designers. So we've got architects, business strategists, graphic design, interaction design, industrial design. So everyone is coming from some background in terms of creative strategy or design. And really what we're looking for in this environment is somebody that is incredibly collaborative when it comes to their working style. So if they make the most beautiful designs but have to work heads down in a computer all day, that probably isn't the best fit for us. It's the individual that's able to kind of roll up their sleeves, get into the group dynamic, do a lot of whiteboarding and collaboration, but then at the end of the day also kind of use their more hard skills in terms of prototyping tools and sketch designs and things like that.
Yeah, I want to second how important it is to be collaborative, because you could not imagine how challenging it is to do that at a company the scale of Google. You're working on a sketch file today, and then later today there's 10 other people who not only want to see what you've been working on today and in the last hour, but they want access to your files and they want to be able to modify it and branch off of it. And so, so collaboration is key. Just keeping your files organized, keeping it accessible, keeping it readable by everybody. Also because, and this sort of leads into the second point of what we look for, generally for designers, not just interaction, but also researchers and every other design discipline, is dealing with ambiguity. And because there are so many people at Google working on very similar problems that you may not even be aware of, you may be working on something today that is not relevant tomorrow. You may be working on something today that somebody is building an identical copy of a building away. You may be working on something today, you don't know what the final vision looks like. You may be working on something that's going to launch tomorrow while you're also thinking of like a 3-month strategy, and you're also thinking about what it looks like 2 years from now. And you may not know these things, so there's like a lot of variables and a lot of moving pieces, and just being able to navigate that is something we're looking for. We're looking for people who like thrive in ambiguity, right? You give them half a problem and they can make steady progress towards a solution, not knowing where they're going, and being comfortable with the fact that a good portion of their work might just belong in the waste bin the next day. So that's something you need to get used to. And then another thing, when we talk about soft skills that we look for, is people who are willing and able to learn constantly. We're not looking for people at the peak of their powers. We're looking for people who have demonstrated that they're willing and they're able to take what they have and just double it in 6 months and in 12 months. So we'd rather have somebody young and fresh who shows that potential than somebody who believes they're absolutely kick-ass and they're at the peak of their powers.
Our situation is very different in that I work with a variety of clients, from the Googles and the Microsofts and Amazons to the smaller design firms. And what I find is common in relation to the soft skills, without a doubt, is curiosity. Not just about their field, but also in an interview, like really being curious about what the company is up to and what they're doing. Also having done that research, so being curious before you even walk into the door. So that's a key one. Also flexibility. I think, Aaron, you were speaking to that, the ability to jump from one thing to another, to meet, ever-changing goals that seem to be more and more common with companies. So those are two key ones. And then as far as culture, really, I think the key for us to assess that is we ask lots of questions. So a question I ask candidates all the time is, what's important to you when you imagine yourself, in your next role? Like, what matters most to you? And you learn so much just by letting someone talk about it a little bit. And we do the same with our clients. What matters most to you in terms of the type of person that would, come in next, and/or tell me more about the people who work best for you. And so really the challenge for us is, managing all of those profiles, in our head, but that's really where it gets interesting and fun. And so I guess we have had to bring in those things. We have to bring in curiosity, and we have to bring in, flexibility to the way we do our work. But really, and I'll just finish with collaboration. I don't know that I've worked for a single client where that hasn't been a huge part of their ask. And most candidates I work with seem to really, these days thrive in those environments. So that's a key thing we're seeing.
Excellent. Well, with that, I know that the audience probably has a ton of questions, so I'm going to open it up to the audience. And what I will do is just, if you could stand up and just introduce yourself, your name and your question, and then I will repeat it for the video. Okay? And then if there's any pauses, I have a long list of other questions I can always throw out there. Okay, great. So any questions from the audience? You guys are, I know that you're lying to me right now. Ryan?
Can I just say thanks?
Yep.
So you're in an interview tomorrow for your dream position, and they flat out ask you, tell me about your process.
So your question is, if you, a candidate, are in...
How do you answer a very open
Like, tell me about your process.
Probably looking for something, I'm assuming. I'm
Okay.
just curious how you do it.
So how do you navigate a question in an interview where the interviewer says, tell me about your process, and as a candidate, you assume they're looking for specifics, but you don't know what those specifics are?
I have a suggestion. So we coach a lot of our talent and the people that come to us on interviewing. And really what that is an open-ended kind of behavioral style question. And so we often encourage people to come up with, 2 or 3 either specific case studies about projects, but even maybe problems they've solved that aren't specific to one long project, but 3 case studies, let's say, and really look at, we talk about the STAR method. So it's situation, task, action, result. So really think through, okay, I worked on this project and the task I was given, the situation was this. The task I was given was to, create 3 conceptual ideas for a new application. And the action, this is what I did, and this is how I worked with the people, and this is what I did, this is what they did. And then what we did was we presented, I'm simplifying this, of course, but we presented these 3 to, the stakeholder, and they chose mine, let's just say. But if you really think through and have 2 or 3 of those, they often, we find, connect to one of those questions. But it's really taking that time to think through how you would speak about them ahead of time versus waiting for the moment in the interview and trying to file back like, oh my gosh, what is my process? I don't even know. So that's just one suggestion of how you could be prepared for a question like that without having to answer the kitchen sink of everything that you do.
Yeah, so I think building on that, that's some great advice. And what I would say also is that's a very personal question as a designer, right? It's less about looking for key, buzzwords or things for you to say, and it's more about just getting a general sense of, from a designer's perspective, how you approach problem solving. So it's not necessarily a right or wrong answer, and it's open-ended by nature for that reason. It's meant to just get a better understanding of, when presented with this challenge or this design problem, how would you best approach this? And then I think that in addition to answering that, grounding in an example is a really good opportunity to show how that process changes, right? So every design problem is going to have some form of challenge, whether it's time or budget or client or resources, and being able to speak to those challenges and how you overcame those or how you adapted your process is equally as important. So I think those are 2 key ways to address that question.
And agree with all of that. Like I kind of bubble that into we're trying to find out where do you fit into a creative process and how do you create impact. And so a prompt like that allows you to break that down for us. There's, again, no right or wrong answer. We're just trying to figure out how you do it.
Right. Next question. While we're waiting for that question, oh, great.
Hi, I'm Leslie. I just have a question. I've been talking about sort of what you look for. I'm curious what role entrepreneurial thinking has in that. It's something you hear about a lot. What role does entrepreneurial thinking have at your company, and how would you characterize it?
So what is the role of entrepreneurial thinking in the skill sets that you're looking for, and how do you think about that?
I was actually going to say, like, in addition to Jen's stuff, like flexibility, collaboration, one of the main words we look for and characteristics we look for is entrepreneurial spirit. When you are a smaller company or a mid-sized company, we're a fairly flat-ish environment. Autonomy is a very real thing. And so we're looking for people who can create activity, who can champion and spearhead their own desk, who can prioritize their day without having a manager, quote unquote, tell them what to do. So for us, entrepreneurial spirit is actually a key part of some of the words that we use to determine if it's a good fit or not.
And I think building on that, as coming from a design studio of fairly the same size. It's very flat in nature, so it's not necessarily reporting up to a manager or having somebody check in. So being able to kind of have that spirit and more importantly, working in innovation, I can't think of a more important skill to have of just thinking outside of the box and being able to demonstrate that you can take an idea and then push it, 10 steps further. And that's not always, the answer or the solution, but individuals that demonstrate that type of thinking are people that we are absolutely looking for. I think one other piece is really getting back to that kind of organizational structure and being able to be a leader and demonstrate leadership at all levels is incredibly important, not only as a designer, but within the studio or the company that you're working for.
I'm going to decouple entrepreneurship from like profitability, because one of the benefits of being like a UXer at Google is that you don't have to think about if something makes money. We have this mantra where you follow the user and everything else follows, right? And another great thing about this is ideas come from anywhere at Google, is what I've found in the time I've been there. If you have a great idea, it's really easy for you to like mock something up and present it to people and start to get buy-in and start to get people on board. And soon enough, you'll have like a team of people working to make this a reality. And this happens from PMs. Ideas originate from researchers, from engineers. I've had like engineers walk up to me and say, I have this really cool piece of tech. We can do this. I'm not sure where this fits in, right? And that's where you can put like your thinking cap on and be like, okay, we can use this to improve this experience, or we can use this to like really improve that product. So ideas originate anywhere, and like original ideas are really valued. And it pairs really well with the 20% time you have. If this is something you believe in, you can get a little team around you, and you can build something, and you can put it out there for like 60,000 employees to test. And you don't have to worry about this making a profit. You just have to think about making a cool product that solves like real human problems. And I think like that kind of thinking is really valued.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add is it is true that not every company values entrepreneurial spirit, and that's what I have seen. And what I encourage all of you is to be true to who you are. So if you're entrepreneurial and you have that spirit and that fire, be that, and the right role. You will get offered the right role. And if you're not, that's okay too. Some people, they want, maybe less ownership and more leadership, and that's okay too, and the right role will follow. At Filter, it's one of our huge values. We have a value called Think Fresh, Be Courageous, and so again, we value the best ideas can come from, the person answering our phones and talking to a candidate, and you wouldn't expect it to come from there, but it does.
Other questions? So I have a question, a short one. I wonder if you can, respecting any personal information, of course, tell a story or give an example of a do and a don't in the interviewing process that you've experienced.
Absolutely. The way I'll describe this, I'm going to describe it as a do. Stay positive. We've seen multiple times really, really talented, high-level talent interview and start speaking negatively about past work experiences and lose the role because of that and that only. So just every negative thing that happens to us, I believe that we can look at and we can find a learning and find a positive spin, or don't speak about it at all if you can't, but that really, it's consistent that I've seen that happen, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, okay, so without going into details, one thing you want to do is, have you heard of this idea of like having strong opinions loosely held? And so I've seen in a couple of interviews where candidates have this seemingly really great idea, and then the interviewer probes a little bit, and then they find like a flaw. For some reason, this doesn't work for some business constraint. And then they just like stick to their guns and try to defend their idea when it's like proven that this is not going to work, right? And so when that happens, it's in your best interest to just sort of rethink, now given that those new constraints, how would you go about fixing that, rather than trying to like bolster your initial argument and your initial design decision. And it's like part of what we look for in designers as well, is have strong opinions. That's great. But when given new input and new stimulus, are you able to like rapidly adapt and learn from that?
I think this ties back to some of the questions earlier around continuous learning, curiosity. One thing I would recommend everyone in this room do is to position yourself of somebody that is continuously learning, right? So coming out of a program like this, we already have established that you have a baseline set of expertise or understanding in a certain field. So I would encourage you to not have to try to focus so much on I'm an expert in this, and more so focus on continuous learning in the sense of, this is what I'm incredibly passionate about, and I don't have all the answers, but this is what I love to do, and here's some work that demonstrates that, and just show that you're not this, this expert that knows it all, or, you've reached this certain milestone, because in design and specifically, technology, that is never going to happen. It's always evolving. It's always changing. Everybody's always trying to stay up to date. So I think one thing to do is just present yourself as incredibly curious and continuously wanting to learn and grow as a designer, and I think that that's really going to help you. One other thing that I've seen work really well is specifically with interaction design. It's really strange to have a portfolio review on a computer or a keynote presentation, or just sitting around a desk looking at a flat object. So having candidates step up and actually use a whiteboard or create a more interactive kind of interview process has been really eye-opening and really fun, actually, and kind of refreshing. I've had a few candidates actually ask to use the whiteboard, and they'll step up and they'll sketch out what they're thinking or what they're talking about, and by doing that, they're demonstrating process, they're demonstrating passion, and they're also taking a risk. It's not easy to do that. Everybody's nervous in an interview, but it shows a sense of confidence and a sense of interest in the field. So that's another maybe back pocket idea, but one that I've seen and works really well.
I tell people to be unapologetically you. This is a chance for you. A lot of you in this program have had a existing work life before you've come back to school, and you came back for a reason, and there's something that you want out there, and to reflect on what that is and what that isn't, and to be bold and be honest to the companies that you talk to. If they don't want to hire what you are, then you've dodged a bullet. Why go into a place that's not ready for you? I also realize that sometimes you just need the door to open, and you just want that job too. So that's a balancing act.
Okay. From the number of questions I get in my office, I know some of you are holding back. So I'll keep asking, but
I have one on that last question.
Right.
Know who you're interviewing for. Like, know the company. Do some research on the people you're interviewing with, because I was just thinking about that. You want to be unapologetically you, but you also want to get your foot in the door. And that's another thing consistently is we'll hear companies say to us, they just didn't seem to know much about us. They didn't seem that interested in our product. And again, the skills were there, the resume, the portfolio, like everything was in place. But that interest and that level of curiosity and research was missing.
You got me started now, but no, go ahead, please. Well, I mean, it was just, going on that and doing your homework and everything. You can also envision, like, what will it be like for us to work together for the next several years or on projects? You shouldn't have to sell UX or research or design or engineering to a product firm. We understand that, but sometimes we still like to hear that pitch, and we still like to get excited about our discipline, and we like to get excited at the thought of why you're passionate and what this is going to be. Going back to culture and the reason why we have it and the reason why it's so important, especially for companies of a certain size, is because you are day in and day out. And so yeah, envisioning the future and why us together. So.
Yeah, I think building on these last two comments, now I'm getting I think a really important thing is to keep in mind the dynamic of the interview. So it's just as much about you interviewing that company as it is about the company interviewing you. And I know that sounds very cliche, but it's very much true in terms of do's and don'ts, I think some of the candidates from a don't perspective do not leave that room without having asked as many questions as you possibly can. So I would highly encourage you to interview that design studio or innovation firm or agency, wherever you're going, and ask tons of questions, right? And by doing that, you're not only going to be demonstrating that you've done your homework and you are prepared and you are committed and passionate, but it's also going to, if it catches the firm off guard, or you're not getting the answers that you want, that's a really big sign in terms of if that's a good fit for you. So I would encourage you to be proactive and remember that you have just as much leverage in that conversation as the company does.
I'll do one more on that. It's asking those questions, even if you're repeating yourself to the 5 different people you interview, and when you're interviewing them, you're looking for common threads. Like, are people presenting the company in the same way? Is this team actually on the same page? Do they share a common vision and goals? Because if it's all over the place, that can affect. In some places are all over the place, and especially in innovation, it can feel like that. But especially like from a cultural standpoint, you might feel like you're on repeat, but it's not repeat. If it's a new person, everybody has a different perspective and answer. So just keep repeating the questions over and over, and then trust your gut.
Thank you. That was a question that got some momentum. Yes.
Sorry, I don't want to ask it. But anyway, Leslie again. I'm curious, sort of a really just practical question. How early in advance do you apply for a position? Like, how long does it take to go through the process? And I've heard in a lot of different roles that people will just apply for positions on a regular basis when they're not even looking to keep those skills up. But what does it do on the employer side when someone is offered a position and then turns it down and then comes back maybe a year later? What does that look like?
So yeah, I think a general question about the timeline of lead time applying and entering the process, and then this cycle of I'm always applying, now might not be the time. Does that take me out of the running later? Is that kind of capturing your, okay, great.
Yeah, it depends. Like, is the massive answer there? I mean, I've had people in my career that have said no to offers and have come back at some other point in time. My personal thought is that we're always growing and learning, and why would I ever shut a door on a conversation that I'm interested in? So, and if you didn't take the offer, then it goes back to my previous advice of, like, for some reason it wasn't right for you, and I wouldn't have backed you into a corner and made you say yes of anything. And so the fact that you've come back around, it's yeah, let's talk again. I'll kind of go down there's a lot more to that, but I don't want to.
Would you want to? Okay. And I agree with Dave completely. It depends. A couple things I would say, though, is that there's a huge difference between not accepting an offer and accepting an offer and then backing out, which does happen. Accepting an offer and backing out could create some concern for the future. Not accepting an offer, I think a lot of it has to do with the communication and the transparency you've had with either, an internal recruiter like Dave or another hiring manager or someone like me. So really what I would say is the more transparent you can be, the better. I haven't really experienced the people who are applying just to apply. Maybe that does happen. I haven't experienced that, but that'll be interesting. But really, I think it's just be honest, be true, and if something's not right for you, don't accept it out of concern for it not being right in the future. But definitely think before you accept an offer. Take that time. A lot of people will tell you, I need to know today, but I think any honest company will give you at least 24 hours to think things through and talk to your families and weigh your pros and cons.
Okay, Tarhata.
Yes, I'm Tarhata. So I'm going to touch base on something you said about people who might have had past work lives before coming into this program. This is the reason why they're in the program, is so that they can kind of make a switch. So I'm curious if any of you have any tips for how to bridge past experiences, because the user experience is a broad field. So how do you bridge those experiences so that people want to look at your resume, and then not only that, but look at your portfolio
I have a quick answer, and then I'll pass it on to these guys. But, well, one, have a cohesive story about why. When I meet a new grad, there are lots of programs that are, helping people become UX designers. And my first question is, why UX design? So make sure you have a good answer for that, especially if your background doesn't naturally lead in that direction. And then I think depending on what you do, it's different for everyone, but I believe that there's a story that bridges, like the connection. For instance, I've recently met with someone who studied psychology and was like a counselor and a psychologist and going into UX research. Well, you can see those ties, but I wanted him to really tell his story as to, how those skills tied in. And he came up with something at the top of, kind of in his summary statement that talked about that in like 2 sentences. And that was powerful. And then it was also on the cover of, the portfolio he had put together with some of his projects. And so I think there's some really creative ways to, and it's honestly, it's a UX problem, right? Like it's a problem to solve and a kind of a fun one to solve. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I just want to second that in that if you worked in a past life or you studied something in a past life and then you joined this program or any other program to make a switch, you did that for a reason. And I think that if you can articulate that reason to your interviewers, that proves to them that, or it makes it more believable that you are now passionate in this field because you tried something else and there was something you didn't like about it and there's something you wanted to make a change of in your life and now you're doing this. So it's like it's really powerful for them to hear that. And also, like, I'm going to agree that it's not hard to make a cohesive story about any sort of background. It's a design problem and it'll take some work, but it's something that makes you unique. You're not as interesting if you grew up and at 5 years old you wanted to be an interaction designer, right? But if you studied art history and you went on to be a motorbike mechanic and then now you're into design, and if you can make the parallels between that, I think that makes you really interesting, and that's what makes you rare as a candidate, if you can find that story.
Yeah, I think building on that, being primarily a creative environment is just having those diverse set of backgrounds and perspectives and points of view. And again, using that more as a value to you and kind of setting you apart of you have this unique perspective. Yes, you're in this field and you have this degree and you have this portfolio to show, but you also have, a world of experience outside of all the other candidates that you're working with or the teammates that you're working with. I think also, using the advantage specifically when you talk about, digital product design in this area is just the market wasn't there, right? This is a very new and kind of evolving field, and it's not expected that everybody was like, oh, I graduated from high school and I went into this HCI program and then I got my master's. It's just not a reality. It's not how it works, and I think that a lot of the recruiters and companies understand that, and what they're looking for are creative, curious, driven individuals that have different perspectives, different backgrounds, and most importantly, a point of view. And as long as you have that point of view and the work to support it, I think that it's not a concern. It's a non-issue.
There's not much more to say on that issue. So, yeah, it's brand positioning, understanding where you fit in. And if you came from no design whatsoever and it was just a totally different industry, what you have is life experience. It's every day that you got up and came in, no matter what that profession was. There's a lot of rookie mistakes that professionally you've already made and they're way in the past. And now it's just taking what you've learned now and moving forward with it.
Hey. Yeah, so the question is sort of like a longer-term relationship of candidates with companies, and even if right at the moment isn't the right time to make a match, how do you stay involved and active and not be overbearing?
Yeah, timing is everything. I tell people I'm always excited to see where conversations go over months and years at a time, and the longer you're in the realm of recruiting, you start to see a secular thing happening, and For me, I like to just know when something's new, but that's something I offer up to people. Not everybody that's way. I tell people, if we've connected one-on-one and I like your background, then send me updates when you've added something new on the portfolio. The role's not always open. I may or may not have a deeper conversation for you. Sometimes I'm thinking of my greater network too, even outside of my role. And so just knowing where you're at, what you're doing, and why it was awesome is at least deepening the relationship. But I think everybody manages that differently. So yeah, it's a thin line. If it was every other week, that you're adding something, but once a quarter is not unheard of, at all. Especially if you're active out there.
Yeah, I think building on that in terms of the cadence, just quarterly or every few months, just providing an update. And I think what's important about that is how you position that. It's not necessarily asking for anything in return. It's rather just hey, remember me? This is what I've been up to. Here's some things that I've done. Here's a link of some of the live work. Here's a link to my portfolio and what I've added. Doing some really exciting things. Keep me in mind. That type of conversational tone versus more of hey, when can I come in to interview, or how's it going? So it's really, I think, not only important about the timing and the frequency, but also how you position that conversation and making it much more informal rather than kind of transactional.
When you asked that question, I kind of giggled because I was like, well, that's what I do for a living, is, stay connected to companies that may not have a need today, but might 3 months from now. But really what I would say to you is everything that these guys were saying for sure, but also, follow your favorite companies on Twitter or connect to them on LinkedIn. Know what they're doing, what they're up to, what they're creating. Be out in the world, network, go to events and parties and different things, because not only will you have an opportunity to see some of the same people that are, representing their companies out in the world, but you're also going to be meeting other, people who work for those companies who, might say, oh gosh, we totally need someone like you. Let me talk to the person I work for. Those kinds of connections are golden. But also you're learning something. You're learning more new things about the industry, new things about what people are up to and doing. And there's so many different events that you could go to. You could probably be busy every single night. But while you're job hunting, it really actually is a job to find, especially your first role out of school. And so I highly encourage you, enjoy your daytime, go to events in the evening, it's just, and hone your craft of being able to say who you are too. When somebody says, oh, who are you? What do you do? Really be able to, be able to say who you are and what you do, and that you're looking for a job in, about 10, 15 seconds. So that everyone you talk to, it's another opportunity to make that connection, and you don't know where it will lead. And you just keep those conversations going.
Okay, so I'm going to just ask one last wrap-up question, and then we'll stop a little bit early so there's a little bit of a break or networking before the next activity. I know a question that I respond to constantly is this issue of unicorns or depth versus breadth, or how do I position myself if I really like the whole process, or how do I talk about I want to be a researcher, but I also really like the design part or the design process.
So I wonder if each of you could just very briefly talk about how you manage depth versus breadth of skills in your organizations.
For us, because we meet all different types of people for all different types of companies, really, if somebody's unsure, wants to do it all, there's nothing wrong with that. But I often encourage people to kind of let me know where their leanings are. Just to give us a sense of where they'd be the most happy and be the most fulfilled. But really, I'm going to steal what Dave said. It's just be unapologetically yourself. And if that's where you are, right now I'm a generalist. I love UX design in all its forms. Then I say be that. But then do your research with a company. If there's a company that you love and it's a UX research job and you'd be happy with that, then you will want to position yourself focusing on those strengths.
Yeah, one of the number one, I know. Yeah, one of of the main things that you want to get rid of is a question mark on what you do. Imagine being a hiring manager and someone is everything, you know, and it's hard to be everything for everyone. And so if we can't figure out like where you fit into that process, then that's just a question mark, and the question mark will kill an interview quick. So yeah, I mean, if you're a generalist, own it. Or if you've got a lot of depth and breadth, then talk about what you're best at and what you love doing the most, and then make sure that and that's where you go deep, and then make sure you're quickly mentioning as well, like, hey, this is how I collaborate with research, or design, or engineering, or strategy, and from there.
Yeah, I think building on that, some of the things to keep in mind is viewing design more as, specifically as a job seeker, viewing design more as a process than as a position, right? So oftentimes people want to pigeonhole themselves as a digital designer or a information architect or an interaction designer, when in reality, a lot of these places and all these companies are kind of multidisciplinary design based. So there are 5, 10, 12 individuals, all of which have some form of design background. It's just they have a point of view on what area they provide the most value in. So I think what's really important is to be able to look at the breadth of design and be able to speak to the research or speak to the development, but really say that you own the interaction design portion of that, or whatever combination it may be. It's just really where your skills are, where your interests are. But I would also encourage you not to, again, being yourself, not worry about that question so much of having a label. I think that in more cases than not is harmful than it is helpful. So being able to speak to design as a process and say that, yes, I've been involved in research and I really enjoy doing that, but what I value most and what I bring to the table is the ability to translate that research into design. Here, let me show you some. So being able to kind of connect those dots, but also speak to the holistic design process is critical for candidates.
Okay, with that, we're going to wrap up the formal portion of this and take a quick break. And if you have questions you were not willing to ask in public, you can maybe find these folks later today.
I would just love to give a big round of thanks to all of the companies that are here, but in particular our panelists. Thank you very much.